Hey, Joe, how are you?
What's up, my man? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I did, so we did an interview before. Was it? It wasn't on Zoom. We just did on audio, didn't we?
No, we did it on Zoom. It was with Matt Parker.
That's right, man.
And
That
it was certainly on video because I just checked it 10 minutes ago to make sure that I didn't wear the exact same outfit.
you know. Now that I remember it, it was like there's no way I could have forgotten. But COVID was such a weird period of everything melting together. It was like the candle wax just all globbed together.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I'm not going to wear those. Yeah, and also, I mean, what I remember mostly is I remember that I know that we were talking, Matt's a big football fan. And we
Yeah,
were talking about the Chiefs and
that's right. That's
yeah.
right. And
And I don't
you have impeccable style, so I remember it. There's no way I could have shook that memory at all. So, yeah.
At the time, I think I told Matt, I said, Matt, you do the talking on this one. So I
Right.
talked, but because he's a really good talker too,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, he's got a beautiful voice,
Yes.
and I don't really like my voice that much. So I was like, oh, come. And I was like, this is a pleasure of a collaboration whereas occasionally somebody can do this stuff instead of me.
Yeah.
So how's everything been with you?
Everything's cool, man. Yeah, it's just starting to get kind of chilly here in Kansas City and everything's moving along. So, and I'm excited to get into Scavenger. It's like you've gone through quite a ordeal in your life, and it's just the backstory on this album is just beautiful.
Hmm.
So, how you doing? How's everything going?
Everything is going well.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I,
So,
I, yeah.
and are you in New York?
I am. I'm in
Okay.
Brooklyn.
Okay, right on Brooklyn. Yeah, my dad was born there. So
Uh,
I only have memories of him talking about the anguish of the Dodgers leaving. He was there then and
oh,
and that whole thing. So um
I
but
think in Brooklyn now we're basically Mets fans. Although I'm a Mets fan because my one side of the family is from Jersey City, and for
okay.
whatever reason they were Mets fans. And I think it was mostly because it was like the hatred of the Yankees was ingrained in us.
Yes.
So I'm as happy if the Mets win or if the Yankees lose. Either way, I'm good.
Well, I think it's going to be a New York series and for me, I was a Mets fan in 86 because
Yeah.
my dad was from Long Island, but that team was so magical. I listened to the game the one game the playoff with the Braves the day after, and I was listening to it on radio, which to me is the most romantic way to get into sports, to have kind of the story get erected around your brain.
Oh yeah.
And that was incredible. What they were doing was like, I was like, oh my God. I came home and I told my wife, I said, there's something going on here with these Mets. Like this isn't some like weird, like myopic moment. And then Alonso hit that home run. They've just been battling Goliath the whole time. And the
Oh yeah.
fans need this so bad. They're just always downplayed. So it's like, get out there and completely fucking kick ass. Do this
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
So
I know.
I'm excited.
Well, I was having fun at this fun. My day job is I'm a musician. Well, actually, the musician for this program for people with Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
But there was this woman who I work with who was like such a Mets fanatic. So at the beginning of the season, I was like, "So would you like to tell us what their record is now?" And it was like 2-10 because they were off to a terrible
Oh,
start for
yeah.
like forever. So
Yeah. Well, it's good. The good times are rolling. So, well, cool, man. Well, it's great to catch up with you. Scavenger is such a wonderful project, and I want to begin there with how did all of this come about? I mean, it seems like it's a journey to get to this point with it coming out. How did this album get conceived and begin its process?
well, the process had kind of started because I was thinking, well, I had been looking at old tracks that I hadn't used, and I've become a vibes player as well as a piano player. So I was like, I can take little bits and pieces of old tracks and turn them into something else. And so I don't think I had called it scavenger at the time, but I was looking like I thought maybe I'll call it upscale or something like that. But what happened was, and then at the point where I just sort of started the project, then I got this crazy diagnosis of cancer. And being who I am, I thought, well, this is the worst news I've ever got. That was my first thought. And my second thought was, well, this is an artistic opportunity because that's sort of how we work.
Yeah.
You know, you take your life and it's not like you wait and you moan for 6 months. And so at that point, I started and I was feeling pretty bad, but there were times that I wasn't feeling bad and I could I could work on the music, and then people were sending me tracks, and there was a lot of stuff that ended up coming from scratch. There was stuff that was added on, and of course, I was at home a lot too. And what I
Yeah.
discovered is the computer work part of it, which is a big part of making anything these days, could be done when you're not feeling at your best. You just
Yeah.
have to not be feeling at your absolute worst. And so I started on it, and I also, from the very beginning, the original idea of the movie is I had 12 sessions of chemotherapy, and my wife, Paula Janine Bennett, she built this structure where I would rip off a page from it every time I'd finished. So we knew we would film that, and I make a lot of movies these days, so I just knew that it would turn into something. And so in around January, and this was, I had an operation, and I don't want to go into like the gruesome details because
Sure.
what I've discovered is other people's stories of suffering are really dull. And so I also wanted not to make it dull.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. But just the big picture was I had a surgery, and then I started my chemo in December, and at the end of January, and I was working on this project pretty hard. I called up Lewis Marks, who was head of Rope-a-Dope, and I hadn't talked to him in a year and a half. And I said, "Well, how are you, Lewis?" And he goes, "I'm fine." He goes, "How are you?" And I go, "Well," and I say, "Well, I was in New Orleans and I almost died of pneumonia, and they were looking." And I tell him this whole really drawn out saga of how I got sick. And I said, "And of course, there's a movie and an album about it, and I'd really love it if Rope a Dope would release it." And he starts laughing and he goes, "This is the best pitch I've ever heard. When do you want to release it?" I said, "The end of the year, because honestly, I don't know how long it's going to take me. I need a lot of time. I don't know how I'm going to feel." But I felt, and the only rule I really set for myself was I wasn't going to record any music after the chemo was done because I didn't want it to be a remembrance of the time. I wanted it to be something that was of the time. And in terms of the movie, I was hoping that too, and I got like 85% there. So it really is mostly done. And a lot of the footage was, there's a lot of footage of me like using my camera and shooting out my back window. And if you look at a lot of it, there's a lot of stuff that it's not the footage of somebody who is like walking the world. There's just a lot of footage from my very limited perspective. A couple times people drove me to, like they drove me to the Greenwood Cemetery, which is this amazing cemetery in Brooklyn. Like Leonard Bernstein is buried there, and all kinds of like, it's like our version of Père Lachaise.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Paris, like where Hendrix is, or no, Jim Morrison and
Jim
all those
Morrison.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we drove around and did shots of that, and so that's the long version of how it ended up being making. In terms of my piano playing, I had a lot of trouble with feeling my hands at times, so I wasn't really practicing. So it was more like, oh, here's a good 10 minutes. And I was well aware that all the bitterness and anger and apprehension and just a total roller coaster of emotions, that what I was lacking technically, I felt that emotionally was going to come out in the work, and hopefully it did.
But this has been one hell of a whirlwind. You got diagnosed in November of 2023. We're in October of 2024. So you've gone through quite a whirlwind of going through treatments and getting this together and sitting here looking good right now. Like, have you taken a minute to just sit back and be like, oh my God, what happened?
Well, that's what I've been doing the last couple months. What happened was what is very strange is that I never really looked that bad, even though it was a very serious treatment. And one of the things that happened was I got my hair cut, and then after a month, I was like, wait a second, my hair isn't growing, but it also wasn't falling out. So I was working, and sometimes I only started telling, like, obviously I told the people, my employers, that I was sick, so I could like rearrange my schedule and stuff. But I didn't tell it. But when I told people, which was more at the end, because also I knew this project was coming out, and at that point it was just going to be, the world's knowledge, and everybody was like, you don't look that bad. You've never looked that bad. I could never tell. So it was just a thing that I had, and I've learned more about a lot of things than I ever wanted to learn about. But one thing I learned is that how you look is not necessarily how you feel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember years ago in Kansas City, there was a singer named Molly Hammer, and she got cancer. And I remember we sat down several times over this time period because it went in remission, and we talked about, what it was like and how she was dealing with it. And something that's been revelatory all these years later that has stuck with me. I remember asking her, "What how did you change your life?" And she said, "I used to say no to a lot of things, and now I say yes all the time." What kind of revelatory place did you get? Because you're an enlightened cat. You're very creative. You're very open. There's a lot of you that is to me from the outside, not knowing you as well as I could, as being like a friend. You're very self-actualized, but yet you're real about it. So at the end of the day, what kind of like momentous shift happened to your foundation and changed the way that you live now?
That is a really good question, and I'm delaying while I answer it, while I think about it. I don't know if this answers it, but in a lot of ways, I've had a lot of illness in my life at various times, and one of the weird things for me is sometimes it doesn't really last past the illness. Like I realized, like a couple months, I was complaining about like a gig. And I hadn't complained about anything that small for 6 months. And I was like, oh, I must be feeling better. Because when you're in it, you're like, oh, life is beautiful and I'm going to enjoy every day and stuff like that. And when you get back, you can get, I, I wouldn't necessarily say that had, it's hard for me to say now because the work that I did was about the time and I wasn't and that was getting me through the time. And also just like the physical aspects of everything were so overwhelming, I didn't really have time to really think about the emotions. And then when I finished it, I was kind of a mess. And who knows, maybe I'm a mess now. I don't feel like the same kind of mess. I feel like I'm kind of like open to the world and I'm ready to have empathy for other people again and stuff like that. So I don't I don't know if I can satisfy you with like a really good answer like of a revelation. I'll probably be thinking about it for the next 3 days and then I'll be like, oh, this is how I'm different and but I'm not sure that I'm like a better person for it.
Right. Well, the one thing about going through a treatment, like going through cancer, and I've had friends that have talked about it, and we've seen all kinds of stories. I mean, the rates of people getting cancer are rather high. There's a part of it that's medical intervention, but there's another part of it that's the sheer will of the human being. What kind of strength and reserves do you have to dip into to find the mental and physical fortitude to get over this?
Well, I'm a pretty positive person,
Yeah.
first of all. And secondly, I had a project to complete. And at the very beginning of it, um, and because it's kind of an existential cancer that I had, there was a part of me that was like, I'm going to get this done before I die. And I lost that feeling during the winter. I no longer like felt like, oh, I was on my last 2 weeks, and then of course I was thinking, I wonder if this project is going to sell a little if I die, of course, because we have these fantasies about our life. We have fantasies of our afterlife. Although in our fantasies of our afterlife, it always includes us knowing what's going on. They're not really like realistic
Yeah.
or something like that. I mean, I was told I didn't really. I would say that when I was in a lot of pain at a certain point, I was able to dip in a little bit to the place that I go when I play ragas on piano, which is sort of trying to transcend what was going on and just being like, I'm going to look down on this body a little bit of above, not too focused. And in some ways, it could make me unsatisfying as a person in my relations with other people because it's like if you're hanging out with a Buddhist and they just go, "Oh, it's all beautiful. It's all fine."
I
Like that. Like, I mean, it also meant that I didn't express a strong opinion on anything. It was like I had detached.
yeah.
So I would say I was pretty good at detaching when things got overwhelming.
Yeah. And that's like I hear from people that survive early trauma in their life, there's almost like there's this floating principle where you have to kind of leave your body. It's just like a separation point. It's probably almost something akin to that, I would think.
I think it's very similar because I was always interested in people who like tell you about something. I even know this guy, he lives in a halfway house and he goes, my my father stabbed my mother when she was pregnant with me, and they always said that I carried that trauma all the way through my life,
Wow.
right? And I've started to understand this idea a little better because like anybody else, I've had problems. I didn't have like a traumatic childhood or anything like that. I don't have these great things I'm carrying around. So this was definitely the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me. And I started to see how if you want, you can live in it forever. Because one of the things that is that's kind of interesting is that when this sort of experience happens, it's also exciting.
Yeah.
It's also, especially at the beginning. At the beginning I said it's a little bit like an acid trip, but it's like the part of the acid trip which is not so fun. Like it's not the first 3 hours, it's like the last 10 hours
Yeah,
of it.
right.
That just keeps going on. But
Yeah.
there's still something that's kind of interesting. And of course, it was like going to a certain kind of summer camp. And because I have a job where I learn like a lot of people's names, you know, I learned the names of 50 people's names in that clinic. And it seems like people don't do that. So everybody liked me just because I knew their name.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this is my hack for life. You don't even have to be nice to people, but if you know their name, they're like,
Oh, of
oh,
course.
yeah, yeah, so I knew everybody's name. So when it finished, there's a part of you like that's like, oh, I kind of missing all these people. Although what was really convenient about it is that the center I went to was only 5 blocks from my house, so I could walk there.
Yeah.
And what's really inconvenient is now that I'm done, occasionally it brings me back flashbacks of the experience because it's
Yeah.
impossible for me to avoid where that place is.
For
It's
sure.
like I'll be walking down the street and all of a sudden like,
Yeah.
oh no, oh no, look where I am. Or if I'm just walking a certain route, I'm like, I got to change this route because
Yeah, right.
it's
Yeah.
not taking me where I want to go at all.
Yeah. You know what's interesting and emblematic of who you are as a person is that your first answer was you were wanting to get this project done. And it's amazing how there's proof that art is the healer. Not only was it been a healer for you and it gave you something to look forward to because this has been your life. You're not just a one-dimensional guy. I mean, You're healing people through your work, you're healing people through your music, your visual, you got all of these things. So at the end of the day, it really is, not to sound cliche, art is a healer because your music is going to heal people in all kinds of different ways that have nothing to do with what you've gone through, but it also healed you and gave you purpose and gave you a vision of getting out of this.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I know from just preliminary response of the movie I made, I don't have any expectation like whether it was going to be, even with music in its in extent, like whether it's going to be good or it's going to be bad or how it's going to be received. That's all a little bit the external world. But some people who have watched it who had cancer, they're like, oh, you've captured a little something of the rawness of it or whatever. And in some ways, I don't even think I was that raw because I go to look at a lot of art museum and you look at times when there was a lot of death in society and like you look at pictures from the 14th century of Jesus and like, they just like they go brutally forward to show what the suffering is really like.
Yeah.
But just like sort of like the emotional part of it, because it's like any experience. It's not all bad. I
Yeah.
mean, I shouldn't say any experience, most experiences. I mean, just like people write about war,
Yeah.
you know, you know, they write about like the times there's some people who never want to talk about it again, and then there's some people who, they join VFW and they hang out with their buddies from that
Yeah.
for the rest of their lives. So there's
Yeah.
all kinds of way. I'm sure there's people. My idea, of course, it's not really working like that right now because the album's coming out right now. My idea was like get out everything I wanted to say and express about this entire issue, and then by next year it's just like don't don't deal with it too much.
Yeah.
My boss at the Parkinson, she goes, well, do you want to be the face of cancer? And I said, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on how many gigs it gets me. But in a general sense, I don't.
Right.
I don't want to be boring people at parties
Sure.
but it really takes a while to get over that because people say, what's new? And you're like, I'm kind of like, please don't ask me,
Right.
because it's sort of like, I mean, you've just killed the conversation if you say the truth,
Yep.
you know. But now I can tell I've changed a little because a month or so ago, all I wanted to talk about was the movie. And now I'm pretty much just want to talk about the music and forget about the movie a little
Yeah.
bit for the
Yeah.
time being. I haven't really watched it for a while, whereas the the music, yes.
So,
Yeah.
what's interesting? We have a very distinct bias here at Neon Jazz for the vibraphone. I love the vibes. One of
Oh,
my favorite things. So I gotta know, what was it like picking that up?
ah, well, first of all, there's a good story.
Good.
And my wife is a percussionist, and she works at Juilliard and she does all sorts of stuff. But she used to be in this guy Guillermo Franco's band, who was a percussionist with at one point with Keith Jarrett and McCoy Tyner and Don Poland. And towards the end, I think he was back in Brazil just before he died, and her son came and he said, he has a storage locker in New Jersey, and I need money to get the stuff out of Hawk, and he was like, if you could help me out, I'll give you like dibs on some stuff because who knows what he has in there. So she does, and sure enough, there's this vibraphone, and this vibraphone is called a traveler because it folds into three pieces, and it's the kind of thing that would have fit in a car in 1957. I think it's from the 50s. So like Milt Jackson would have been doing his tours with this kind of vibe because like they didn't have like pickup trucks. They weren't going around like how did they go around with vibes?
Yeah.
So this was it's not a super expensive vibes, but it's got a pretty trashy sound because I work at Juilliard a little bit too, and sometimes I go into the percussion space where they have like the $7,000 vibes, and I was like, whoa, these are a lot easier. The bars are like this big, and you
Yeah.
can't really hit a wrong note. On these ones, do you know what a note is? It's where the line comes across. It sounds like this when you hit it, like not really the note. So there's that, and so when I got it, I've never really been a much of a multi-instrumentalist. Of course, like I know where the notes are on the vibes and I go, but I was practicing it but I'm more of a parts player in that I can do a jazz gig or I could certainly do like a pop jazz gig as long as we don't go faster than medium tempo. Once we go like faster than that, I'd just be like some people I've played with. I'd be like, you over there, you solo now. And so I just I love the sound of it. But what I found was when I was practicing parts to play on this album, I would have to practice them a lot. And there's a mirror I can see. And one day I was really working hard on this part. And I go, all of a sudden I got my hands crossing right and I do this fast thing. And I saw my face and I was like, oh, I look like I'm like 12 years old when I played the piano, because it was so the excitement of,
Oh
of
yeah.
being able to do something new. Because when I play piano, I kind of just expect I'm going to sound good.
Yeah.
I mean, so it ranges more from frustration to satisfaction. It's not like I totally amaze myself. Like somebody will say, "Oh, you sounded great tonight," and I'm like, "Well, thank you." Well, I'll just say thank you, but I'll think to myself, "Well, that's what I sounded like when I was also warming up." It's
Yeah.
not like it's not like I've transcended myself somehow because I was in front of people in a or a different way. So I love the sound of it, and I like the look of playing it. I like the feel of it, and it covers all sorts of flaws in music. But what can we say? It's called the vibes because it gives the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, totally it does. So, Richard, Scavenger is the new album. If anyone wants to pick it up in the proper way to benefit you the most or catch you live, any of your previous work, any of the good business, where can they go?
I would say to my band camp,
Okay.
um, and that would be Richard X Bennett
Right on.
dot bandcamp.
And then live shows, anything coming up?
Um, I actually have a steady duo that's every couple weeks in the East Village, which is a small gig, and I'm not I'm not sure if I'm going to do a show for this release, which is still a month from now, or possibly just more like show the movie
Yeah.
and talk to people.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Richard X,
yeah.
it's no, go ahead.
The movie's already been shown in a couple places in Europe, strangely enough, and
Okay.
that was good. It's like I and I'm hoping at some point that the movie gets picked up because it's sort of like an installation. It's not necessarily a movie where you just like sit watch on a screen. It could be
Sure.
playing like on a wall or something. So what I would like is eventually that it like get shown like in a cancer ward,
Yeah,
so people can watch this while they were waiting or something like that, and it's like artistic reflections on an experience.
that would be genius. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be wonderful. Man, it's always great to catch up with you, man. I can't wait till the next time. Best of luck with this. Best of luck with everything as we move forward. I appreciate your time today.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Take
Take care.
care.